Hello, Sites Dragons. We are going to go over the Family Educational Rights and Policy Act, known as FERPA. What is FERPA? FERPA is a federal law that protects the confidentiality of student education records. It applies to schools that receive federal funds through a program of the U.S. Department of Education. So elementary schools and secondary schools would fall under that. It also applies to colleges and universities, whether those are public or private, that receive financial assistance from the federal government. Under the rights of FERPA, parents are granted those rights on behalf of their children. The rights will transfer to students when they turn 18 years of age or if they attend a college. So if a student is 16 or 17 and they are attending college, they will receive those rights under FERPA. Parents who claim their children as dependents on their taxes also retain those rights. Who makes sure that FERPA is enforced? It is administered by the Family Policy Compliance Office. And if parents or eligible students believe that their rights have not been handled correctly and have been violated, they may file a formal complaint with the Department of Education. What rights does FERPA provide? The right of parents and adult-age students, they should be able to ask for and receive a copy of the student records. They have the right to deny access to others, specifically anyone outside of the school system. A process to correct errors, including a hearing. The right to opt out of military recruitment. The right to opt out of the disclosure of a student's directory information, and we will look at what falls under that. And they have the right to a complaint process, and that will be handled by that FCO office with the Department of Education. What information does FERPA protect? FERPA prevents disclosure of information from a student's education record, but doesn't prevent disclosure of directory information. We're going to look at the differences between those two types. Educational records are related to a student, and those are maintained by the school or maintained by a third-party vendor on behalf of the school. And when choosing those vendors, schools make sure that they also abide by the FERPA laws. And FERPA will prohibit the release of education records without the consent of parents or the eligible student. Educational records include the student's grades, their health records, progress reports, grade point average, attendance records, and also surveillance recordings, any of those recordings that are directly related to that student and they are maintained by that educational institution. Not educational records. Any records that a teacher may take during teaching. Law enforcement or campus security records created and maintained solely for law enforcement reasons. Employment records, alumni records, grades on peer-graded papers before they're recorded, and any surveillance recording when a student's image is simply incidental, so maybe they're in the background of a recording, or in a school activity that is open to the public but does not focus on any specific student. So maybe during practice there are video cameras going in the gym or a game, but they are not picking out a specific student. Directory information. That is personally identifiable information that is not generally considered harmful if disclosed. A lot of times this is called PII. FERPA allows schools to disclose this information without consent as long as they provide public notice to families that explains what types of information the school has designated as directory information. So I think about with sites or our district, we use Skyward that holds a lot of the directory information. So that is the student's name, address, telephone number, date of birth, what activities the student may participate in when they attend school, email addresses, place of birth, photographs, grade level, enrollment status. So that would be our student data system that holds all of these. Disclosing information. Anytime schools give out information, they must maintain a record for each request. and each disclosure of that PII from the educational records of each student, as well as the names of state and local educational authorities and federal officials and agencies. They must maintain that record of disclosure within the education records of that student as long as those records are maintained. The record of disclosure, so every time information is being shared, this disclosure must have the parties who have requested or received the PII from the education records and the legitimate interest the parties had in requesting or obtaining that information. When disclosing information, there are exceptions to that are held under FERPA. FERPA makes an exception to its restrictions on data sharing in situations that may protect the health or safety of students or other persons in connection with an emergency. FERPA permits school districts to disclose student information if there is a judicial order or lawfully issued subpoena. So maybe with immigration, if they come in and they have a subpoena to see the records, the school would then have to disclose that information. In connection with a health or safety emergency, or in connection with a student engaged in a crime of violence or sex offense. How long should this data be retained? According to FERPA, they do not require educational agencies to destroy education records. However, when the records are no longer needed for a specific purpose as which they were kept for, they should be destroyed. And in the agreement of schools, they should specify a time period for when they are going to be destroyed. And they require that there be an end date, but there is no maximum time limit. And they require the third party, so if there are third-party vendors being used, they require when the contract ends with the use of that third party, or when the third party no longer needs that information, that the data be destroyed. And then schools and districts will most likely establish their own record retention policies, including timeframes for eventual destruction of the records. How does FERPA impact the classroom? 3 ways for teachers to be careful. They need to make sure that they are using technology and being careful with using technology in their lessons. So a lot of times in our district, making sure to use those sites that are district approved. With those sites being district approved, the district has made sure that they are following FERPA laws. Keep any student data you have secure. So anything that may be personal information of that student, make sure to keep that safe, and respond carefully to access requests. If you get a request for data and you are unsure of who is requesting that, you need to immediately take that to administration. And 2 areas that teachers can share student information. So if a teacher is going to share students' grades with the registrar or the secretary, that is okay under FERPA laws. Or if they were to contact the counseling office with concerns about a student's mental health, they may do that without consent of the parents. Also, if a teacher witnesses an incident, such as a fight on school grounds, he or she can talk to other parents or the press about what they saw. When it is an observation, that is not held under FERPA law. However, if a teacher was to read a report about it, that would be held under FERPA. Digital age updates. So as we continue to have education evolve and become more online, schools are needing to update their FERPA laws. So here are a couple quotes that I found very interesting. Schools are in the business of educating students, but they need to be very aware of what is in their contracts and make sure they are holding vendors to what is in their contracts. So if they are using third-party vendors, they need to make sure that they look at their vendors' contracts to ensure that they are not sharing student information. Digital record keeping has replaced traditional paper files. Classroom assignments and assessments are often delivered online. And especially right now, as we are transitioning into our online learning, we know a lot of what we are doing could put students at harm. So in our Zoom conversations, we know that in our recordings, we shouldn't be posting videos that show images or names of our students. Ways to ensure your school is FERPA compliant. Raise FERPA awareness, so make sure that we all are aware that FERPA is present at our school. Confirm that FERPA applies to you. Know the rights, protections, and exceptions. Choose compliant vendors. Train all school employees. Each year it'll be important that we review the FERPA laws and policies, as they will tend to change year to year. Implement complaint policies and procedures. Encrypt files and emails. Implement other prevention tools. And then looking at our board policies, areas that follow FERPA regulations, and our student data systems, acceptable use policy, and through our district technology and internet, and district or school websites. And to close, these are the references that I used and giving you the information today.